we are so glad to introduce one of our inspiring coalition advisors, Alisaya Immonen. They're going to give a crash course on intersectionality, which we kind of touched on during our Kahoot in some of our workshops, but we're super excited to delve into right now. And we're so excited to hear their incredible insights on how the movement for gender equality can be truly inclusive as well as impactful. So take it away, Alisaya.
Hi, can everyone hear me all right? Okay, perfect. I'm at orchestra rehearsal right now, so I just wanted to make sure that everything was working all right. Thank you, Alinka, for the introduction. I'm Alisaya Immonen. I use they, them pronouns, and I am lucky enough to be kicking off this third session of this amazing summit. So I'm just going to start with a brief introduction of myself and my role with Girl Up. So I'm currently a senior at Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School, where I play viola and co-lead the Genders and Sexualities Alliance, as well as the Students Together Empowering Women Club. And with Girl Up, last year I was a member of the executive board, and this year, as Alinka said, I am an advisor. And sort of part of my role is to be aware of the inclusivity and intersectionality. So I will be sharing a short presentation on the importance and history of intersectional feminism. Share screen. Sorry. Sorry, one sec. Awesome. All right. Alinka, can you see that all right?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. So yes, intro to intersectional feminism. We are going to start by discussing the most important figure in the world of intersectional feminism, and that is Kimberly Crenshaw, who's pictured on this slide. She is an American lawyer, civil rights activist, philosopher, and a leading scholar of critical race theory who developed the theory of intersectionality. And right now, she's currently a professor at the UCLA School of Law and Columbia Law School. So she's clearly a very cool and still very influential person. She coined the term intersectional in 1989 to describe how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics intersect with one another and overlap. And prior to her coining of this term, it was a relatively obscure legal term. Now, I just want to take a minute to pause and challenge you all to reflect on the multiple identities that you have. This could include, but certainly is not limited to, the identities that Crenshaw highlights. And I just want you to name these to yourselves, think about how they overlap a little bit. But I also want you to recognize the identities that you don't name. And when it comes to intersectional feminism, the key is advocating for, including, and making space for people with a wide spectrum of identities. And part of that is ensuring that we aren't limiting the voices we amplify to the ones that already sound like ours. On that note, I want to acknowledge that mainstream feminism has never been truly intersectional. There are far too many instances, from the Seneca Falls Convention in the 19th Amendment to the exclusion of trans folks, particularly women, from sports, to meeting in spaces that simply aren't accessible by disabled folks, where feminists, particularly white women, have actively excluded others in their feminist work. And I use quotations because any wins or progress that uplifts some at the expense of others aren't really wins. However, even today, not everyone sees the importance of intersectional feminism. And some terms or groups you all may be familiar with include white feminists, trans exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs, and sex worker exclusionary radical feminists, or SWERFs. Their names are pretty self-explanatory, and for the most part, their feminism fails to be intersectional. And some of the pushback that intersectionality receives from these groups and others is less in the definition and more in the potential application. Some, particularly those with more privilege, fear that they will be losing something or face increased social stigma. And to that, Crenshaw states, there have always been people from the very beginning of the civil rights movement who would denounce the creation of equality rights on the grounds that it takes something away from them. And even to those who do push back against the definition of intersectional feminism, for whatever reason, she notes that these common critiques actually affirm the theory's fundamental truth, that individual identities intersect in ways that impact how they are viewed, understood, and treated. But ultimately, in response to those who may fear sectionality and what it may bring, Crenshaw makes clear that she doesn't want to replicate existing power dynamics and cultural structures just to give people of color power over white people, for example. Instead, she wants to get rid of those existing power dynamics altogether, changing the very structures that undergird our politics, law, and culture in order to level the playing field. But even to people who do agree with intersectionality and Crenshaw's wonderful vision for the future, many are unprepared and hesitant to do the work that needs to be done to address and undo the multifaceted existing systems of oppression. And I am not going to even begin to pretend that I know how to create the change that Crenshaw describes, but I can offer some tips and tricks to make your feminism and feminist spaces more intersectional. And if you were at our Intersectional Feminism event a couple of weeks ago, these are definitely going to look familiar. And these include self-reflect, recognize people's differences, decenter your perspective and seek other points of view, use your voice as an agent for change while respecting other voices. I personally like to rephrase this as take space, make space, be open to thinking creatively, be striving to collaborate with those around you, and be willing to make mistakes and be open to being corrected. Please keep in mind that this is not a definitive or exhaustive list. If you do everything on this list, more power to you, but simply is not enough. It is my hope that by attending these sessions today and continuing your education far beyond this Zoom, that you all are able to develop the skills to make viable changes in your community. Well, that is all that I have. Thank you for sticking with me through this. I hope that you kind of have a better idea of what intersectional feminism is in some ways that you can maybe apply it in your own spaces. Yes, I've stopped sharing my screen. Awesome. And I'm going to turn it back over to Alinka and Mackenzie to introduce